My name is Carol Redman, and I am 27 years old. For most of my life, I believed there was something inherently wrong with me, something invisible yet undeniable that made my own mother choose my brother over me again and again without hesitation. My mother abandoned me long before I ever understood what abandonment meant. While my older brother Marcus was raised under her watchful, affectionate gaze, I was handed off to my grandparents when I was still a baby. I was told later that it was temporary, that she was overwhelmed, that postpartum depression made everything unbearable. But temporary turned into 8 long years, and by the time I returned, I had already learned what it felt like to be loved, just not by her. Growing up with my grandparents felt warm and whole. Their home smelled like home-cooked meals and safety. I thought they were my parents for the longest time, and no one corrected me. I slept peacefully, laughed freely, and believed the world was kind. That illusion shattered slowly, one visit at a time. My parents would come by occasionally, always together, always smiling. They would sit with me for a few hours, play with me, ask questions, and then leave. And every single time, they took Marcus with them. I remember standing by the window, watching their car disappear, wondering why I was never invited to go too. I didn't have the language to call it rejection back then, but I felt it. When I turned 8, they finally brought me back home. I remember being excited, hopeful, naive enough to believe I was finally chosen. That hope didn't survive long. The first thing I learned was that I wouldn't be getting my own room. Despite there being an empty bedroom, my parents insisted that Marcus and I share. They said it would help us bond as siblings. Marcus hated the idea. He made that clear from the start. Everything I did annoyed him. If I laughed too loudly, read the comic books my grandparents had given me, or decorated my side of the room with drawings, he mocked me relentlessly. He called me childish, weird, embarrassing. When I brought home good grades, he rolled his eyes. When I practiced the keyboard my grandparents bought me, he told me to quit because I sounded awful. I tried to make myself smaller, quieter, easier to tolerate. I stopped playing music. I hid my books. I convinced myself that if I changed enough, he would accept me. He never did. One day, after he mocked my appearance, pointing out a skin condition that had left my face covered in pimples, I ran to my mother in tears. She barely looked up. She told me to stop crying and toughen up. My father avoided the conversation entirely. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I didn't understand it then, but I was learning a painful truth in this house. My pain was inconvenient. And this was only the beginning. By the time I entered my teenage years, the house no longer felt like a place I lived in. It felt like a battlefield where the rules were unwritten, but the outcome was always the same. Marcus won, and I learned to swallow the loss in silence. As I grew older, my resentment didn't disappear, it fermented. Marcus noticed changes before anyone else did. I was getting taller than him, faster, stronger. Instead of laughing it off like a secure older brother might have, he turned it into another weapon. He called me names meant to humiliate rather than tease giant freak awkward. He did it loudly, confidently, because he knew there would be no consequences. For the first time, I didn't run to my parents. I fought back. I called him short. I hid his books on shelves he couldn't reach. I took a cruel satisfaction in watching him struggle just as I had for years. When he complained, my parents scolded me for being disrespectful, but they never once asked why I had started acting that way. Standing up for myself felt empowering and disgusting at the same time, like I was becoming someone I didn't want to be just to survive. Our home grew heavier with each passing year. Every meal felt tense. Every silence screamed louder than an argument. I stopped believing things would ever get better. The moment that finally destroyed any illusion I still had came during my school's annual awards ceremony. I had worked relentlessly that year, studied late into the night, pushed myself beyond exhaustion. I was set to receive the top academic award in my class, and for once I allowed myself to hope. I asked my parents to come. I told them how important it was to me. A few days before the ceremony, my mother informed me casually that Marcus had a swimming competition scheduled on the same day. She said he needed her support more. She promised my father would attend my ceremony instead. I told myself that was enough. One parent was better than none. I was wrong. When my name was called and I walked onto the stage scanning the audience for a familiar face, my heart sank. There was no one. No clapping hands I recognized. No proud smiles meant for me. Just strangers. Later that evening, I returned home to an empty house. Hours passed before they came back laughing, excited, celebrating Marcus's win. My parents hugged him tightly, praising his achievement like it was the highlight of the year. No one asked about my ceremony. No one apologized. That night, something shifted permanently. I stopped asking them to show up. I stopped sharing my achievements. I stopped believing I mattered to them. My grandparents were the only ones who celebrated me, who listened when I spoke, who reminded me I wasn't invisible. Their praise became my lifeline. When Marcus graduated high school, my parents threw him a huge party. A year later, when I was accepted into an Ivy League college, they did nothing. My grandparents stepped in, and even then my parents complained that I didn't deserve such a celebration. That was when I realized it wasn't about circumstances or stress or bad timing. It was about choice. They chose him every time. And somewhere along the way, I learned how to choose myself. College was the first place where I could finally breathe. Away from my parents' house, away from Marcus's shadow, I started to remember who I was before I learned how to shrink myself. I still carried the damage with me, the instinct to stay quiet, to expect disappointment. But for the first time, my life wasn't dictated by who my mother favored that day. It was during my second year that I met Daniel Harper. Daniel wasn't loud or flashy. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was thoughtful, intentional. He noticed things about me that no one else ever had: how I apologized too much, how I hesitated before sharing good news, how I flinched when voices were raised even in harmless situations. Instead of asking me to change, he asked me why. That alone felt revolutionary. Our relationship grew slowly, naturally. He never tried to rescue me or fix me. He just stood beside me, steady and patient, reminding me sometimes gently, sometimes firmly, that I wasn't difficult to love. Over time, I started believing him. My parents, however, never did. Marcus's girlfriend was welcomed instantly. She was praised for everything from her appearance to her lack of ambition. My mother adored her, constantly commenting on how easy she was, how agreeable, how she didn't challenge anyone. Meanwhile, every time Daniel came up in conversation, my parents found something wrong. Too quiet, too opinionated, too much influence over me. The irony was painful. Daniel had a successful career, treated me with respect, and supported me unconditionally. Yet my mother seemed personally offended by his presence in my life. She made snide remarks about how relationships should work, how women shouldn't be too independent, how men should be the ones leading. The implication was clear: I wasn't playing my role correctly. I tried at first to keep the peace. I brought Daniel to family dinners, smiled through the discomfort, ignored the passive-aggressive comments. But Daniel wasn't someone who let himself or me be quietly disrespected. When my mother mocked his job or questioned his intentions, he responded calmly but firmly. Never rude, never loud, just unyielding. She hated him for that. Eventually, I stopped going to family gatherings altogether. It wasn't worth the tension, the judgment, the way my mother seemed to scrutinize my every choice as if waiting for me to fail. I don't think my absence affected them much. If anything, it made their lives simpler. 6 months ago, Daniel proposed. It wasn't extravagant. No crowd, no spectacle, just the two of us sitting in the quiet comfort we had built together. When he asked me to marry him, there was no hesitation. I said yes without fear, without doubt, because for once my happiness didn't feel like something I had to justify. Telling my parents was another matter. My father congratulated me warmly. My mother said nothing. Later that night, she sent me a message expressing her disappointment. She claimed that as a woman she knew better and that Daniel wasn't right for our family. When I asked her what exactly he had done wrong, she accused him of encouraging me to talk back, to stand up for myself. That was when I understood the truth. She didn't hate Daniel. She hated that I wasn't obedient anymore. I told her I was done listening to her tear down my relationship, that I loved him, that I wished I had learned years ago what Daniel had helped me realize, that standing up for myself wasn't disrespectful. It was necessary. She called him bad news, said he was changing me. She was right about one thing. He was. And for the first time in my life, I didn't apologize for it. I sent out the wedding invitations 2 months later. Every envelope felt symbolic, an olive branch I wasn't sure anyone would take. Despite everything, I invited Marcus. I told myself that adulthood meant extending grace even when it wasn't earned, that maybe this milestone would finally pull us onto neutral ground. He never congratulated me. A week later, he declined the invitation without explanation. I tried not to let it sting. I had learned over the years how to pretend rejection didn't hurt. But then my father called. He sounded hesitant, careful with his words, and I knew before he even said it. He told me he would attend the wedding, but my mother had decided she wouldn't. She had committed to attending an anniversary party Marcus was throwing for his girlfriend on the same day as my wedding. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake. I followed Marcus online. I knew they had already celebrated their anniversary weeks earlier. The timing felt deliberate, almost calculated. Instead of calling my mother right away, I reached out to Marcus. I wanted to hear it from him. He didn't deny it. He told me they had wanted a bigger celebration, but hadn't had the money at the time. He explained without shame that he had worked hard to secure a venue, and that the only available date happened to be my wedding day. When I asked if he could move it even slightly, his response was immediate and cold. His girlfriend's happiness came first. He ended the call before I could say anything else. When I confronted my mother, she repeated the same excuse she always had. Marcus needed her more. My father would already be at my wedding, so why was I being selfish? When I told her how deeply it hurt, how invisible she had made me feel my entire life, she scoffed and accused me of being dramatic. That was the moment I stopped trying. I told her she could do whatever she wanted, but I was done acknowledging her as my mother after this. She laughed, as if my words meant nothing. On my wedding day, I walked down the aisle without her. My grandparents sat in the front row, their faces tight, with restrained anger and heartbreak. They had begged her to come. They had warned her what this choice would mean. She ignored them. The ceremony was beautiful. Daniel held my hands like they were something precious. For a few hours, I let myself be happy, but the absence lingered like a shadow no amount of love could fully erase. Later that night, photos surfaced online. My mother was dancing, drinking, smiling, as if there were nothing else she should have been doing. It wasn't the partying that hurt, it was how publicly, unapologetically, she flaunted her absence from my wedding. She never called, never texted, never congratulated us. When my grandparents confronted her afterward, they didn't hold back. Years of frustration spilled out at once. They told her they were done watching her neglect me. They told her they were ashamed of the mother she had chosen to be. Then they said something none of us expected. They told her they were reconsidering their will. That was when she panicked. For the first time, it wasn't about love or regret. It was about money. And that realization hurt more than her absence ever could. My mother called me the day after my grandparents confronted her. Her voice was shaky, frantic in a way I had never heard before. She didn't ask how the wedding was. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She went straight to the point. She asked me to talk to my grandparents. She said things had gotten out of hand, that missing my wedding had somehow escalated into a misunderstanding. She kept repeating how unfair it would be if I received their inheritance instead of her, how she was their daughter and deserved it more. I listened quietly numb, realizing with sick clarity that she wasn't calling because she regretted hurting me. She was calling because she was afraid of losing money. While I was still processing that realization, Marcus sent me a message. He accused me of involving our grandparents in private family matters. He said our mother was terrified, and that for her sake I should stage another wedding, something small and intimate so she could attend and restore peace in the family. Reading his words felt surreal. Even now, even after everything, he believed the solution was for me to bend, to erase my pain, to accommodate them one more time. Daniel didn't hesitate when I showed him the messages. He told me gently but firmly that I had already given them countless chances. He said another wedding wouldn't fix anything. It would only teach them that my boundaries were temporary inconveniences. I knew he was right. Then my grandfather called. He told me that he and my grandmother had finalized new wills. They had named me their sole heir and removed my mother entirely. Hearing it out loud made my chest tighten. I had suspected it, but the confirmation still stunned me. My grandfather explained that it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about decades of neglect, favoritism, and choices my mother had made again and again. He said they trusted me to care for them, to honor what they built, and to never abandon family the way I had been abandoned. I cried after the call ended, not out of triumph but grief, for the parents I never had, for the childhood that could have been different. My mother didn't take the news well. She bombarded me with calls and messages accusing me of stealing from her, of manipulating my grandparents, of betraying my own blood. When I finally answered, I told her calmly that if she had a problem, she should speak to them directly. That was when she said something that shattered whatever fragile thread still connected us. She told me she wished I had never been born. She said my pregnancy was an accident, that I caused her postpartum depression, that she had wanted to get rid of me completely, but settled for giving me to her parents instead. She admitted she loved Marcus more because he was easier, because he never challenged her, because he never reminded her of her own failures. The words hurt, but they also freed me. I told her I was grateful for her honesty, that it finally explained everything I had spent my life blaming myself for. I told her I was done arguing, done, hoping she would change, done sacrificing my peace for her approval. I warned her not to contact me again and told her I would involve the authorities if she showed up uninvited. Then I hung up. I spoke to my father afterward. He admitted that some of what my mother said was true, but he apologized for his silence, for his absence, for not protecting me when I needed him most. I asked for space, and to his credit, he respected that. As for Marcus, I sent him one final message. I told him how much I had looked up to him as a child, how desperately I had wanted his acceptance, how lonely I had felt growing up away from our parents. I told him that he could have chosen to be my ally instead of my rival, that I didn't hate him, but I was done allowing him to hurt me. Then I blocked him. Today my life is quieter, lighter. I am building a future with my husband, a man who stood beside me when I finally learned to stand up for myself. My grandparents are still my safe place. My family, it turns out, was never about blood. It was about who stayed, who chose me, and who never made me feel like I had to earn their love.